All right, so this little video breakdown, recap, analysis, predictions is for Barry season 4, episode 4. I'm just gonna get into it. We didn't get a prison break this episode, which I found kind of disappointing. I was kind of looking forward to that from this episode, the possibility of there being a prison break, and it would have been nice to know how Barry escaped. It is kind of weird that the authorities seem to think that Fuchs is the source of the assassination attempt on Barry. Although it also seems like the cops are interpreting that assassination attempt to be an attempt to break Barry out because that's how it ends up is that Barry escapes. So maybe Fuchs, they think that Fuchs is part of the whole Barry escaping thing. So Cusino mentioning Coral Tree Cafe during the beginning is great for shadowing, and it shows how sensitive and just kind of bitchy he is, and hard to please, and how he's kind of hoity-toity. So Hank switches from being really serious and concerned to being happy about unveiling their gang hangout early on. That's an early sign of how deranged Hank has become in this episode. He's kind of a far cry from how he was when he was introduced, where he used to be super happy-go-lucky and funny and everything, and now he's kind of turned a little cutthroat and bloodthirsty. The gangsters are super childlike in their enjoyment of the gang hangout scene, which is kind of a recurring theme in this show, is how childish adults can be. But you can tell there's something weighing on NoHo Hank at the beginning of the episode. I did kind of wonder if the in-show movie with the blonde woman Kristen, I wondered if that was based on Thor. It's definitely a parody of Marvel type stuff. Sian Heder is a real director and did direct Coda, and that was actually her acting as herself, which was a Best Picture winner in 2022, I think. So the movie seems like it could be a spoof on the Eternals because of that director. I mean, it's a cheesy movie made by an auteur female director who had just won Best Picture. Sally seems to have an odd amount of people recognizing her for weird reasons. You know, it seems like her reel tape, her highlight reel tape, is getting her more recognition than her freaking out on her assistant. So watching the blonde Kristen forgetting her lines is super super cringe inducing. I don't have much experience with acting, but I do have experience with public speaking. And when you forget what's happening and you forget your train of thought, it can be super embarrassing. So I did notice that Cusino looks like he's slicing already sliced bread that's still wrapped in the plastic. So he's like trying to like cut through the plastic and slice it, even though it's already sliced. The sounds of Fuchs getting tortured is pretty harrowing. The blonde Kristen saying that she sacrificed herself by dating someone who is 5'3" is super funny. She looks like she's at least 5'10", so that would be a pretty significant height difference. But that kind of stuff is all over Reddit. People complaining about women liking men of a certain height. So Sally definitely tries to steal the acting job. That is super cringe that she tries to steal the acting job from her student. It's really impressive acting though. And she's obviously acting like she's acting, which is a whole nother layer. Her acting job is super melodramatic. I mean, it's kind of hard to picture that in a Marvel movie, which are generally a little bit more lighthearted. But she just isn't the superhero type physically, and the other woman is. The police storming the Dave and Buster's is super, super funny, but it's unclear why they would have thought that the Dave and Buster's was their headquarters, was the gang's headquarters. Because they only use it as a meeting place once. I guess they probably could have gotten shitty intel, maybe intentionally, to kind of throw them off the scent or something. So drowning in sand would be super horrible. Maybe worse than drowning in water, in my opinion. You know, you'd have the sand all down your throat and in your eyes and in your ears and everywhere. You know, sand everywhere. Everyone hates that. Fuchs has obviously gained the respect of the other prisoners. That's pretty obvious in this episode. And it's because he's not giving up info. But what's funny about that is that he doesn't actually have any info to give up. It does seem like maybe Fuchs is going to try to start a gang in jail, like he already was trying to, but that may be more of a thing in the future of him gaining power in jail. Cusino possibly killing his son is such a Cusino thing to do. It's super in character for him to freak out about nothing and shoot at a figure in a doorway. I definitely didn't see it coming that it was his son, but I probably should have. It is foreshadowed. I do keep thinking that he has irrevocably fucked up his relationship with his son, but his son is very forgiving, so maybe they still have hope. You know, Cusino seems to continually do stuff that would cause most people to go no contact or low contact. and it's unclear why his son keeps forgiving him. Although Kusino is kind of seen as a bumbling idiot who is still likable though. So it's unclear why Kristen, the blonde woman, why she's so in demand for her acting. I mean, the talent agent says that she would prefer to be back home with her family. So like, why isn't she? Like, how was she discovered? Why did they hire her? If she's a no-name person, then what's going on with all that? I doubt it'll ever be explained. But it's unclear why Sally turns down the talent agent. The roles Sally would be appropriate for, according to him, I do doubt that those would be roles that Sally would really want. But I mean, that's better than nothing. You would think that Sally would jump at the chance to restart her career. I do think it's possible that she already knew about Barry escaping and that she is already kind of planning on. She already kind of knows that he'll come and visit her and that she wants to run away with him already. She may have already decided to do that. They seem to have kind of dropped the whole Sally being well known for yelling at her assistant thing. That seems to have kind of blown over super quickly. I wish I knew how to lip read because it's totally unclear what Kristen was saying to Sally when the helicopter went over. And then I did find that NoHo Hank and Cristobal's fight was super realistic. From my own experience, sometimes something happens that completely changes your view of someone you're dating. And it can be really hard and painful to actually act on that changed perspective. When somebody shows you a new side of themselves, it can be hard to kind of make that gel with your already preconceived notions about them. And that argument was super realistic. The whole I would never fall in love with a psychopath. I found that very relatable. My most recent ex-girlfriend has borderline personality disorder, and I did find myself questioning my own sanity and wondering exactly why I was so attracted to her and what was keeping me in the relationship if she was so angry all the time. That kind of stuff happens to people. Where are you going, Cristobal? Where are you going? And then Cristobal is saying, I'm leaving you, Hank. And NoHo Hank insisting that Cristobal can't leave. The conversation is super intense. I've had similar conversations where that ex-girlfriend has kicked me out and then has changed her mind when I'm in the act of leaving, and that kind of stuff. It's very realistic. I found it somewhat triggering, but whatever. And as someone who's had some drawn-out arguments that ended in me and the other person hysterically begging and yelling at each other, it was definitely triggering to watch, like I said. NoHo Hank does admit that he didn't think about how the gang takeover would affect Cristobal. That's also super relatable. You can't always predict how your partner is going to respond to stuff that you say or stuff that you do, even if you know them really well. It kind of that particular part reminded me of the end of the 7th episode, the end of the TV show Swarm, which is Donald Glover's new project. I just binged that this weekend. So NoHo Hank sitting there and crying, it's so relatable and harrowing to watch. It's such great acting. I can't imagine being in the room for that, watching him do that. It's super amazing. And breakups are really hard, especially when they're as intense as the one between Cristobal and NoHo Hank. The first time I watched the episode, I didn't realize that Cristobal would have to die rather than being broken up with, but in retrospect, it makes a lot of sense. He definitely did know too much. And then getting to the end of the episode, it looks like Jim Moss was preparing to drive away after he sees Sally come home and act so normal on her way into her house. He even says, damn, like he is disappointed that lead went nowhere. It's unclear if he'll actually drive off or not. That could change what happens depending on what he does, because if he does drive off, then he wouldn't be able to see Sally and Barry leaving. But if he does stay, then he'll assumedly watch Sally and Barry leave and perhaps follow them. And maybe my TV sucks. I don't have a very nice TV, but I couldn't see Barry in the darkness until she says his name and he walks out. I didn't know if that was visible for other people. He looks so crazy and fucked up, Barry does. And I'm unsure if Sally saying let's go to Barry is a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, it does seem to imply they're going to run off together, as does the very end of the episode. But we'll see. And at the end of the episode, we've already seen how vivid Barry's hallucinations can be and how believable they are for him and for other people. So maybe that end thing was a daydream, although it's super detailed for it to be a daydream. And you would think that, I don't know, it's just kind of a weird thing to daydream about. It does seem to imply that we'll get some sort of time jump. But I don't know. Where would Sally and Barry really be able to hide? It looks like it's America. The kids are using American accents. And everything. So just some notes on the season on this episode. This episode is one of the most fucked up and hard to watch episodes of Barry. Maybe the most fucked up and hard to watch. I did kind of already say that Hank and Cristobal wouldn't last this season, and that one or both might die. So I was correct on that. Thank you very much. It does seem like NoHo Hank is in his Heisenberg era at this point. The ending was super. The very, very end was super confusing and weird, which does kind of jive with the rest of the show. It'll be interesting to see where the show goes from here. The scene with the police being so brutal with civilians, it did stick out some to me. They haven't addressed anything related to police brutality in the past, really. The social commentary has been all about Hollywood up until that scene. And cops seem to have been depicted as almost completely harmless and like they are buffoons who are just kind of average Americans and like idiots. They're portrayed as somewhat harmless. So the show does fairly accurately depict toxic relationships. I mean, Barry and Sally are super toxic, but they seem addicted to one another, like stuck with one another in this odd way. Even though both of them, or at least Sally, could probably find someone else. It seems like their history kind of weighs them down and keeps them returning to each other. And then Hank and Cristobal definitely turn toxic by the end. So now I'm going to get into some predictions. So the part where they show stuff from next week is always so nebulous and short, but it does look like we could be getting more of the possible future or hallucination that is the end of this episode. I could see some type of NoHo Hank and Fuchs crossover stuff going on. Like maybe NoHo Hank tries to break Fuchs out of jail, or maybe NoHo Hank tries to have Fuchs killed in jail, or maybe NoHo Hank uses Fuchs as some type of bait, or Fuchs uses NoHo Hank as some type of bait for Barry. I do think that if Barry and Sally do run off successfully, they'll have to return to LA at some point. I think there's a very small chance that Kusano's son actually dies. I think it's much more likely that Kusano is going to be forced to go back to LA and take him to a hospital and possibly have to be exposed to journalists again. But this time he's going to be infamous for shooting his son rather than for being a part of Barry's story. The way the ending scene was shot, it was obviously supposed to remind us of the flashback scenes from earlier in the season with Barry and Fuchs. So it does seem possible that Sally and Barry do go back to where Barry is growing up, but you would think the authorities would check there. So I don't know. I do still think it's possible that we will get to see Barry's family and some backstory for Barry before the season ends. I did question whether or not there'll be a funeral for Cristobal, and it seems like his death will probably be a defining factor for Hank and his moods and his actions for the rest of the season. All right, so that's the end of this little video. If you could like and subscribe, I'd appreciate it. I'll be back next week with more coverage of Barry and Succession, and Yellow Jackets will be back on next week, so I'll have some stuff about that. Thanks. Like and subscribe. Thanks.